Hello, May class, and welcome to your next English lesson. In the previous lesson, we were looking at our vocabulary words and we were introducing the new topic of graphic novels. So in today's lesson, we are going to be going into the features that are found in a graphic novel. So let me share my screen with you. So we are going to be better understanding the features of a graphic novel today. Right, get to know your graphic novel. So on the side there is an example of a graphic novel, and when we look at the outside features, and we will go into a little bit more depth about what each of these features are, you will see the following things. You'll see panels, frames, gutters, speech and thought bubbles, captions, and quite a bit of onomatopoeia. So the panels are the stories themselves, the pictures that go into the stories. The frame is the bit that goes around it, and the gutter is the space between each panel. Speech and thought bubbles are the text, quite a lot of the text that's being said in our stories. The captions are the story itself as it carries on. So think back to our story about Tutankhamun and how whatever was being said was in the speech bubbles, and then the captions then held more parts of the story. And then onomatopoeia is something that we're going to be going into a little bit more detail, but it gives more detail to our story and it makes it more exciting. So we will go into what onomatopoeia is today. So again, here's another example of a graphic novel, and you can see that we've still got our thought bubbles, we've got captions, panels, a gutter, we've got a dialogue balloon, which is obviously a speech bubble. We have sound effects, which we can see is very similar to the onomatopoeia one. So that is another example of what your graphic novel will look like and what will be included in it just from an outside perspective. Going into a little bit more detail. The panel is the box that contains the story itself. The panels are usually arranged from left to right and then top to bottom. And you should be able to read it like that. So you'll read across, then you'll stop, you'll read across, and then you'll stop, and you'll go down the page. So left to right, top to bottom. The gutter is the space that is between the panels. So you'll see in between each of those panels, that is our story, that make up the story. This one is a black gutter that separates the panels from each other. In the previous one, you could see the gutter was actually different colors. In these two, you can see the gutter was white. So it's the space between our panels. Word balloons and thought bubbles. So these contain dialogue or thought of the characters in the story. So the dialogue is what's being said, or thought, what's being thought in their heads. And that is portrayed in a speech bubble or a thought bubble. And you'll notice that even though it is being said, it's not something that includes speech marks, okay? Because it's being directly said out of the person's mouth, and you can see that that speech bubble comes out of the person that is saying it. So we actually don't include speech marks in this type of writing. A caption box. Now, having read our story map yesterday, you would have noticed that there were caption boxes underneath. And these are rectangular boxes either at the top or the bottom of the panel, and they're used to help tell the story. We call it a narrative aid. They help the reader understand the setting better, the story better. So if we zoom in, let me just find my zoom button. If we zoom in here, we can see a picture here where it says, "Not even I, the great Mark Antony, can resist such a vision." And so that's a speech mark, but then our caption box underneath here tells you a bit more about what's going on in the story. So it says, with Caesar dead, Cleopatra needed another Roman ally to prevent Egypt from becoming part of the Roman Empire. So Cleopatra dressed herself as a goddess, as the goddess Isis and set sail for Tarsus to meet Mark Antony, one of Rome's new leaders. So it's actually explaining a bit more about what's happening in the pictures, the setting, what's going on in the story, but it doesn't include the speech marks. It doesn't include what's being said by the character. So if you can imagine writing a story, whatever's being said is in the speech marks, and the part where you're telling what's happening is in the caption box. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Zoom out. Okay. Now, onomatopoeia. It's quite a big word, so try and say it with me. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. Now, onomatopoeia are words like these that you can see on your screen. So they are sound words, and it is a word that imitates the sound being said. So imagine boom, huh, crunch, pow, zonk, slip, crash, pow, pow, whop, wow, biff. All right, those are what we call onomatopoeia. So when you are reading a graphic novel, as we mentioned before, you read from left to right and top to bottom. And then you read items in each panel the same way. You read from top to bottom and left to right. And then you can either read the speech bubbles beforehand, you can read the speech bubbles down to the caption box, or if the caption box is at the top, you read that, then the speech bubbles. But it is just like reading a normal story, left to right, top to bottom. Okay, again, there's an example of how to read it. So left to right, and then you would go down to the left again, all the way across, down, all the way across, down, all the way across. Right, action to action transitions. So within the story, you'll find that the action of the characters change from frame to frame. So your story moves on within each frame, and it usually takes place over a short period of time, each kind of frame. And often used in fight or chase scenes, you'll see action in each one. And we also have sometimes got movement lines where you've got, if you're having someone running, you'll have lines behind them showing that they're running really fast. So you can see from this that actually the pictures in our graphic novels are really just as important as the text, if not more important. So remember, graphic novels show you the story rather than tell you. So you need to take your time and study the illustrations in a graphic novel carefully. We've just gone through a few of these. So when you're looking at a graphic novel at first glance, you'll see the following. You'll see the panels, you'll see the gutters, you'll see the speech bubbles and thought bubbles and the onomatopoeia and the caption boxes. So just by looking, that's what you'll see. And obviously you'll see the pictures that go with the story. When looking at a graphic novel, we also look at the sentence level features. Specifically, during this topic, we are going to look at what goes into adventure stories and in an adventure story graphic novel. So adventure stories are a type of narrative in which the protagonist, so the main character, goes on some kind of a journey. They usually have to overcome something exciting or dangerous, and there's often some kind of villain, so a bad person or a dark force that the main character has to beat. Maybe in an Egyptian story, it could be, you could be an adventurer discovering a new tomb, and you go in and then there's a mummy stopping you from doing that, or an evil emperor that wants to make sure that you don't take any of the gold out of the tombs. They contain lots of action. Some sections are fast-paced, while some are slow and more descriptive. Most adventure stories are told in chronological order. However, sometimes the writer uses things like flashbacks to tell events in a different order. And usually our adventure stories are written in the past tense. So when we look at the sentence level things, you're going to be looking at things like using your descriptions, just like you would when you're writing normal stories, very good descriptions, using your nouns, but exciting nouns. So instead of saying dog, you could say puppy or hound. Make sure you're using describing words, your verbs, but interesting verbs. Rather than run, you could say sprinted or jogged or rocketed past. Think back to our stag lesson previously, where we were looking at our word climb of what words you would get from tortoise slow to rocket, I think it was rocket fast, and the words you used in between that. So making your writing exciting. You use things like similes and metaphors, using like or as in your stories, describing something by comparing it to something else. We will be going into a little bit more detail about these things. Using onomatopoeia to help with your story. Bang, crash, right? You can use long descriptive sentences, but you can also use short, snappy sentences to help move your action along. So things like she ran, and then just stop. So the mummy came at her, she paused, she ran. Okay, so it gives you action moving your story along. Make sure you're using the correct punctuation. Have you used interesting sentence openers? We have done a bit of work on this already. We've also done a bit of work on using your conjunctions and your fronted adverbials. These are all things that you know you should include in your writing, especially when you're writing a story. Now, this, when we're usually writing stories, we would obviously use speech marks, but as mentioned before, with our adventure stories in a graphic novel format, if you're going to use speech, we can use our speech bubbles rather than our speech marks. Okay? When you're writing an adventure story, you should also think of where it's taking place. Is there danger? What characters are you going to include? Do you have a hero of your story, the main character? Do you have a villain of your story? What kind of a quest are they going on? What kind of adventure? What kind of a journey are they going on? So these are all things that will help with writing your story. If you would like, you can obviously pause the video, have a read through. This is just some extra information that could be really useful when you are writing. And obviously with your structure, you need a beginning, a build-up, a problem, the resolution and your ending. So your 5-part story, I want you to think about that. Think about where all the adventure is going. Where do you reach the peak of your story before things either start getting better or they just end really badly? Your story should also have a title, so make sure that you have that. So your tasks for today are as follows. I want you to have a look at the the graphic novel extract that we have at the bottom there. Label this one with features of a graphic novel, just as we've had that we've gone through earlier. Think about what you're looking at. Think about the panels, the gutter, the frames, onomatopoeia. I even mentioned movement lines, which you can see quite nicely here, where they slam the door, and then you've got the fact that you've got those lines showing that the door's been slammed. So label your features for your graphic, or label the features that you can see on this extract at the bottom. Once you have done that, create yourself a toolkit for a graphic novel. So think about not just what it looks like, so the outer features that you can see and you would have labeled in the previous task, but also what goes into your story, what makes up your adventure story, what makes up your graphic novel. And then finally, I want you to explain what each of the features is used for. So why do we use some of these features? What do we use the gutters for? What do we use onomatopoeia for? What do we use our speech bubbles for? So go into a little bit more detail about what each one of those is for. Now, I understand that some of you may not be able to print out this picture for your task 1. I am quite happy for you to maybe draw me 2 frames of your own and then label what goes into them. So you could make 2 frames of your own, maybe 2 or 3. With either you can copy these ones or create your own 3 frames and then label each thing that goes into that. So I'm hoping that you start finding the graphic novels really interesting and that you are really excited by this topic. I know it's not normally the kind of book that we would normally read, so it really is quite exciting that we've got a graphic novel to read. And obviously we will share a bit more about our text map, making sure that we're reading through it and we understand the story and that we've learned what goes into the story. So please make sure that you complete your work by 4 p.m. and upload everything that you've done onto Tapestry for me to see.